Today we'll be taking a look at Lost Sphear, Tokyo RPG Factory's sophomore effort and follow-up to I Am Setsuna. I enjoyed I Am Setsuna personally, but there were a lot of common criticisms regarding its lack of environmental diversity, bland piano-only soundtrack, indistinct characters, and derivative story and battle mechanics which took perhaps a little too much inspiration from Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy X, yet lacked the heart that those games had. I feel Lost Sphear does a lot to address those criticisms, but the ultimate question for me was, has it found its own soul? While games like this are meant to harken back to the golden age of JRPGs, does Lost Sphear find a way to root itself in design philosophy we all want to see make a comeback, while also establishing its own individual greatness? After several hours, I can say that Lost Sphear makes strides to improve on features that people disliked in I Am Setsuna. Off the bat, the world is not entirely snow-driven and has a little more diversity in its landscapes. I say a little because, at least so far, most of the world appears to be covered in brown grass and reddening trees, replacing the winter motif with an autumn one instead. In general, I'd say that while it finds a small measure of diversity, overall the environments don't look as good as Setsuna's did. When you compare the trees, the buildings, the detail in the environments, Setsuna feels more painterly and beautiful, while Lost Sphear comes across feeling quite bland, in my opinion. The soundtrack, however, is quite nice so far. While I loved I Am Setsuna's melodies and overall feeling of melancholy, I really wanted to hear some strings in that music. The OST here gives us that and more, and ultimately creates a more immersive atmosphere, even if only because it feels more natural this way. For many, I think this will feel like a big improvement, and there have been several tracks so far that I've really loved. The battle mechanics have also seen some changes. While there's enough similarity to make it feel intuitive to those who played Setsuna, there are some interesting changes that I've really appreciated so far, and they definitely help to single out Setsuna's unique ideas and separate this game from Chrono Trigger's shadow. The biggest one to me is the fact that you can move the characters around the battlefield and position them manually when selecting their actions. I can't really stress enough how this one change has made the battle system so much more engaging for me. Basically, when a character's ATB fills up, you select either attack, skills, or items, which is common JRPG fare, but then you're given control to move the character around the map and place them around the enemies however you see fit. For short-range attackers, this means you could hit multiple enemies, rather than just one, if they're assembled close together. And with long-range attackers, you can hit multiple enemies even if they're far apart, so long as they line up with your sights. This presents a layer of strategy to positioning that I find a lot of fun, and I hope it continues to deepen as the game progresses. You can see how against this boss, who continually tries to pull you in close to its face, as long as you can stay away from the area of effect, you can avoid devastating damage. Similarly to I Am Setsuna, there's an element of timing with your attacks, where if you press the Y button at just the right time, you'll inflict extra damage. This is all tied to the momentum system, where you can use the momentum you've built up over the course of the battle, similar in some ways to limit breaks, to give yourself a little extra damage. As with Setsuna, you'll automatically get one momentum slot to use when you approach enemies from behind and initiate a preemptive attack. Well, here they've actually taken that idea one step further, allowing you to tie momentum effects to your Sprite Knight abilities. This means that when you use one of your abilities and press Y with the right timing, you can customize what effect will be applied, rather than just doing extra damage like you do with your standard attacks. In this case, when I use my wind ability with Kanata, he heals himself as long as I use the momentum with the right timing. I think this is a great addition and can't wait to see what other kinds of momentum effects there are in the game. So yeah, when it comes to gameplay, I think Lost Sphear is doing a lot of things right. I'm definitely enjoying it so far. Where it seems to have not improved much is in its storytelling and character interaction. It's not that it's bad, it's just really bland. There's very little style, flair, or genuine tension to make any of it very interesting. I like the premise of the story, which is certainly more original than I Am Setsuna was, but the writing really fails it in a lot of ways. I think the biggest problem is that there's a general lack of urgency considering the threat that the characters are facing. They seem to behave in such a way that it makes the plot kind of float from one point to the next, and it just comes across as being a bit aimless. For example, after a commander in the Empire realizes that our main character has the power to bring back these areas of the world that have become lost, the party is taken to the Imperial capital. Once there, the player is directed to the blacksmith, inn, and sprite night shop and told to go check them out. After doing so, one of our characters gets pickpocketed by a kid, and an entire scenario built on trying to locate his lost wallet takes precedence and priority over restoring the world from this mysterious problem. You actually leave the Imperial City after just having arrived there to go on this rambling distraction that feels completely pointless and has no bearing on anything. There isn't a new story revelation, there aren't any new gameplay mechanics introduced, and the player's funds, as in the money you personally use to buy new equipment and so forth, isn't affected by this event at all. The only thing you get is access to a ship, but you can't take it anywhere because there's a giant vortex preventing you from sailing to areas you couldn't already access by land. And there isn't any reason why you couldn't have gained access to the ship through an event at the capital. Maybe the Emperor grants you one, or something like that, you know what I mean? It's literally a completely pointless diversion, and it hurts the pacing of the story in a big way. I'm also really not a huge fan of the characters here, mostly because they're unbelievably predictable, and like a lot of anime archetypes, show no signs of any kind of progression or depth whatsoever. They're all completely one tone. This is basically how every interaction in the game goes. This character, Locke, acts rashly, without thought, and sometimes a little bit rudely. He says whatever's on his mind, but he means well. He's always at the forefront of every scene and is generally the first to act. Then this character, Lumina, reacts to his lack of discretion. Then this character, Vaughn, will make fun of Locke, who will then react angrily. Then your NPC will continue to give you the new information, then everyone turns to the main character, Kanata, to ultimately make a decision. I'm not joking, that's exactly how every scene in the game so far has panned out. It's some of the most repetitious and flat writing I've ever seen, and there's very little heart in it at all, which I think is a big shame. Overall, I'm having a pretty decent time with Lost Sphear, and if you were a fan of JRPGs during the 90s, I think that there's a lot that you'd enjoy here. I do ultimately think that it's worth checking out, but at $50, the price is definitely a bit steep. If you're looking for great storytelling, you're not going to get that kind of value out of the game. But I do think the battle mechanics are genuinely fun, and my experience with the game has been positive overall. That being said, I'll continue to update you guys as I play a little further into it, and until next time, have a great day.